What's up everybody, Jesse here, and it seems like we finally have some news concerning the next Mario game for the Nintendo NX. Joining me on this discussion is Drake Vagabond, and she says, but I want you to be a part of this discussion as well. Comment below and let us know your thoughts on the news and what we have to say. In the latest Nintendo investors meeting, Nintendo finally mentioned the new Mario game they are working on. Among other things, they mentioned that this new Mario game will be using the same physics engine that Breath of the Wild is. This isn't new though, as Super Mario 64 shared the same engine as Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, and Super Mario Sunshine shared the same engine as Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and Star Fox Adventures. So it's common for Nintendo to reuse an engine developed specifically for one game within another. However, it seems Breath of the Wild has influenced the development of this new Mario game in other ways as well. I believe it was Miyamoto who said that, just like with the new Zelda game, Nintendo has also been working on changing the conventions of the Mario franchise. Now, with Zelda, the basic formula is enter dungeon, find dungeon item, use item to complete dungeon, use item to defeat boss, find new dungeon, repeat. However, almost every 3D Mario game has been different from each other. We have Super Mario 64, Super Mario Sunshine, Galaxy, Galaxy 2, and Super Mario 3D World. All of which, except the two Galaxy games, play completely different from one another. So it seems like we don't have too much to change unless they're going to be making an open world Mario game. Personally, when I think of them changing the conventions of Mario, I imagine something like Super Mario 64, but instead of giving us Peach's castle to explore, we get the entire Mushroom Kingdom. And instead of selecting a world or jumping in a picture, we can freely travel to the different sections of the kingdom and explore them. But I want to know your guys' thoughts on this, and for those watching this on YouTube, I want to know your thoughts as well. Comment below and let me know how you think Nintendo is changing the Mario formula. What can they add with this new Breath of the Wild engine that will make this new Mario game for the Nintendo NX so superior, or different from past Mario games?
So my imagination takes me a lot of places. It's tough to think about the fact that it's going to be Breath of the Wild's engine and how that incorporates itself into Mario. One of the things that Nintendo knows very well is that their 2D games are much more successful than their 3D games, and they've started to show that with the number of releases lately. And I can't imagine them not incorporating 2D gameplay into this new Mario game with that sales data in mind. I mean, I can always be wrong, but that's... So I guess if I was to take a guess, I would think that they're going to go a Sonic Generations route, where if they're going to use the engine for Breath of the Wild, which is more accommodating to a full 3D game, you might see some elements that are like Mario 64-esque, and then you can go to certain levels that become 2D. I mean, as far as invigorating the franchise, it's really tough to even think about what they can do at this point that is not completely off the wall, like past games have already been, like Mario Galaxy, like you said, Jesse. So it's tough to say where they can go at this point that would really revolutionize the series that they haven't done already. So I mean, that's probably that's my best guess, is that they're going to incorporate both 2D and 3D into this next title, and hopefully there's going to be a little more freedom to move around when you're in the 3D segments.
I think they've been saying that about all Mario games, really. But in this new one in particular, if they really want to change things up, they would have to change the conventions of how Mario works, and change. There's a lot to I'm not saying there's plenty to change, but there's a lot that can't be changed. For instance, Mario was meant to be the most accessible game that Nintendo has. So it's just a simple pick up and play, beat it if you want to. It's a lot different from Zelda games where it takes some intrigue and interest to at least get through it. So I'm not sure what I'm not too sure about what they mean by they're going to change it up, because a lot of game developers say that when they want to reinvigorate a franchise, and with Nintendo, they say that a lot. So I'm not really sure what they mean by, you know, I'm not sure what Miyamoto meant by that, because they basically do that with each and every game, almost. So I'm not too sure on that.
Yeah, what I would
That's-
personally like to see, and I think maybe fans would like to see this too, since a lot of people put Super Mario 64, maybe just based on nostalgia, as one of their favorite Mario games and just games in general, if they're Nintendo fans. But if they could take elements from that and newer games like Super Mario 3D World or even Super Mario Galaxy and kind of combine them to where, as in Super Mario 64, as I stated earlier, it was kind of like a miniaturized open world. You had the land outside of the Peach's castle, and you had the entire castle itself with all these different rooms. You had the moat outside, and each room had its own picture that you could jump into to get to these new worlds. And even outside the castle, there were some platforming and puzzle-solving elements. So, with that in mind, if they took that and just scaled it a lot larger to where instead of just Peach's castle, which was fine for Nintendo 64 since it had limited space to work with, building it for the NX, you could potentially give someone the entire Mushroom Kingdom as their playing field instead of just the castle, to where we see different worlds in the Mario games, to where there is like an icy world, a ghost world, a forest world, and stuff. What if these were just different sections and Peach's castle was in the middle?
Well, that was one of... Oh, sorry.
Like what I was going to say is they could have it sort of not completely open, but have it sectioned off to where you start out at the castle, you get something that lets you access, say, the forest world, and then you go there, you get a special key that lets you go one room higher in the castle, and then once you complete that, you can go to another world, and you can go to any world that you want to, but once you complete the castle or the boss of that world or that section, you can then take the key back or the item back to Peach's castle and use it to get one floor higher, and that is how you would progress to fighting Bowser at the top.
So that was one other thought that I kind of had, was that it was going to be full 3D Mario and that it's going to expand on the world. Now, the way I thought, I was like, it can't be as expansive as Breath of the Wild. It doesn't become a Mario game at that point. But I did think of the fact that maybe games like Banjo-Kazooie and Mario 64, it is semi-open world because you're exploring a very expansive hub world that feels like a world of parted areas, like the paintings in Mario, or they kind of like signify themselves as just like entrance ways to these other worlds. I was thinking that if you want to expand on that, the only way you could really do that is kind of like what you said, is find ways to allow Mario to access these other worlds, kind of like Metroid-esque. But the other thing that I was thinking more importantly was that maybe they were going to try to make the world, the hub world, even more believable than ever before. Like, you're not jumping into a painting that brings you to an ice world. You're actually going to an ice world within the world of Mario. But still, I out of the two, I just imagine, like, I personally think that they're going to try to incorporate 2D, and that's how they're going to try to innovate one franchise into two.
Yeah, well, we've seen them experiment with mixing different Mario genres together with like Paper Mario and then Mario and Luigi.
Oh, that's right.
We had Paper Jam. So maybe we could look at that as an experiment on a handheld console, as what we could potentially see with a 3D Mario and a 2D Mario. Not necessarily the same two characters being in the game, but maybe there is a 3D version of a world, like in Sonic Generations, but there's also the 2D version, but instead of just like a 2.5D like Sonic Generations had, it's actual like a fully realized 3D version, maybe looking about the same as Super Mario 3D World, to where it's not fully like behind the back changing the camera 3D, but it's still considered 3D, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then you get the basic 2D version of that as well.
Yeah, I was thinking more along the lines of, like, since, they're in the mindset of going back to old Zelda games to make Breath of the Wild, I thought that they were going to take the same approach with Mario. And just, like, hearing this news, they were going to just, like, go back to the old Mario games and try to find out what worked there and just, like, breathe new life into that through the new Mario game that they're going to announce. I don't know. Again, I don't know how they're gonna innovate on something so simple as Mario.
Yeah. We'll see the difference. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just gonna say the difference between Mario and Zelda is that like the Mario franchise really has expanded on itself over the years, whereas Zelda has tried different things that were dynamically different from each other. So it's kind of like if you tried to breathe new life into the first Mario, like in the same way that Zelda just did with Breath of the Wild. I didn't intend a pun there. I can't imagine it because it would just be regressing at that point, wouldn't it?
Yeah, because Zelda, at least there's like an element to like figuring things out about Zelda.
Yeah.
Because it demands Zelda kind of asks or demands a challenge. It's a challenging game. And Mario, it's an entertaining game. It's challenging in a way, but it doesn't demand too much it doesn't demand too much of you to say challenge it at all. It's just like a really simple game. Pick it up, play, put it down, come back years later, and then you're still where you are. Know as much as you do back then.
There's huge.
That's all.
Taking what you said, sorry to interrupt you. I'll just make this really quick. It reminds me of like where Mario is a platformer and Zelda is an adventure game. You can add way more to an adventure game and still have it an adventure game. But with the platforming game, if you change it too much, then you kind of take away from the core aspect of it. Like if you look at like Banjo-Kazooie we brought up earlier, that game was basically, if you just put Mario in that game instead of Banjo, it would be like taking the formula from Super Mario 64 and then adding an adventure element to it. Like I believe if you mixed Ocarina of Time and Super Mario 64, you would get Banjo-Kazooie in some form. And I think that would really be the only way that you could advance Mario forward, unless you did what I think is the obvious and just make a sequel to a game like Super Mario 64 or Galaxy or 3D World, but instead of just adding local multiplayer like they did in Super Mario 3D World, you added online multiplayer to where even if you were playing by yourself, you could still have someone join. That in itself would be enough to bring a sequel forth to one of those games and still have it feel different enough from past games that it would stand on its own.
Yeah, it just has to many ways for it to change. It would just have to change what type of platformer is it, because that's basically what a lot of Mario games, especially the 3D ones, do. It just changes what type of platforming you're doing in the game. And I'm not going to say that I'm just going to expect that. I'm expecting them to change what type of platforming game it is and just try a new spin on it. But it can mean anything to me what they're going to do with the next Mario game.
All right. And do you have any final thoughts?
I think I'm good. I mean, I just hope that they don't rob elements from other veteran franchises like Metroid. Like, I just don't want the Mario franchise to obsolete something that we love, like Metroid or
Yeah. Don't basically don't make they take Metroid elements and put them in Mario and do them better, and just brings up the question, why didn't you just make a Metroid game
Right.
instead?
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you both for joining me. And for those that are watching this that may not be familiar with the content that you make, for some reason, I don't know why they wouldn't, where could they find you and what could they expect to see on your channels?
Well, my name is Drake. I'm on the channel Drake Vagabond, and I talk about Dynasty Warriors history and introduce to you some very silky smooth voice acting.
I run the channel She Says. Sometimes I go by Derek. I have a less silky smooth voice, but if you like jokes, if you like exploring things, and you want to see new things to games you've played in the past, you should check out my channel. It's definitely a lot of fun.